Welcome back to Curious Now from the Center for Medical Simulation. I'm Jenny Rudolph, an organizational behavior scholar interested in everything that goes on in our brains and hearts that helps us be amazing or gets in the way of that. Today, we're going to be continuing our series on psychological safety. Last week, I introduced what that arc was going to be like. We're going to start with what is it like on the inside when I feel psychologically safe or not? How do I build psychological safety in my teams? And then how do I work organizationally to create a culture of psychological safety? So today I want to talk about the inner climate of psychological safety. And what I mean by that is, how do I feel internally when I feel psychologically safe? We're going to start with that internal climate because being able to detect the signs and symptoms of how am I doing psychological safety wise is really an important step in our being able to promote psychological safety in our team or build a culture of psychological safety. So I'm going to start with another rock climbing story, this one where I was climbing with my sister, Amelia Rudolph, who's a somewhat more experienced climber than I am. Perhaps that's an understatement, a much more experienced climber than I am. And we were climbing a single pitch climb, but a long one. And a pitch can be as much as, 90 feet, half a climbing rope. And let's say I was about 50 or 60 feet off the ground. And I got to a point where I just felt really stuck. And what stuck felt like at that moment was the last piece of protection I had placed was below me. So I was climbing from the bottom and placing protection as I went, which means ways of making sure I don't fall. Maybe 5 feet below me or something like that. And I was climbing up toward trying to put another piece of protection in. And I suddenly felt like I couldn't do it. I was looking up at where I needed to go. I was looking down at where I had been, and my palms started sweating. And when you're standing on a little tiny nubbin on a cliff, sometimes your calves get a little tired, and so my ankles started jiggling, and my breath started catching, and I definitely felt not safe. So obviously, physically somewhat threatened, but also all my creativity left me. And what I realized in that moment was the environment of, did I feel safe enough to do the task I needed to do, had somehow deteriorated. And I think of psychological safety as, is this environment safe? We usually talk about it for interpersonal risk taking. But I think at the heart of interpersonal risk taking is a sort of courage. And so even though this rock climbing moment involved physical courage or psychological courage, and it wasn't particularly an interpersonal moment, I really froze. So building on that story of getting stuck on a cliff temporarily, not being able to move, our readiness goal this week swirls around the idea that one of the early signs that we are not feeling psychologically safe is that we tend towards some sort of rigidity, whether it's kind of an attack sort of rigidity, a flight sort of rigidity, a freeze kind of rigidity. And so our readiness goal this week is we'd like you to be ready to detect and name one or two ways that you feel physiologically, psychologically, emotionally when you feel psychologically unsafe. So, what are the characteristics of those moments within us when we sort of lose the sense that I am safe, I am able to do what I need to do, I feel calm, connected, curious, confident? All that stuff leaks away. I think those are the moments that happen when psychological safety, my perception of psychological safety, drains away. In contrast, if you think about how do you feel when you feel safe and social, when you're in an environment where it's a little bit risky, I'm thinking of a class that I took maybe 30 years ago on how to be a manager and a leader in teams. And I was working with an amazing consultant and teacher named Charles Perry. And he was having us work as a group, um, kind of challenging each other to get better doing a task. I don't remember what it was. But I felt extremely exposed because I was a young CEO of a small consulting firm and was supposed to know what the bleep I was doing, and I really didn't. Maybe I was talking about some initiative I was leading. And I remember thinking, as I stepped into this exercise, wow, I could make a total fool of myself here. But there was something that Charles and the other facilitator had done to make me feel like, you know what? I can take the risk to maybe make a fool of myself, and I'm not going to be humiliated. I'm not going to be shamed. And I think the things that he did were introduce this exercise in a very funny, light, positive way, let us know how we would be learning from it and how our mistakes might be used to help us learn, not used against us. So if you think about somebody you've worked with where you're working at the edge of your expertise, by which I mean you can't quite for sure do it right, and yet you felt exhilarated or encouraged, that's a feeling, in my view, of feeling psychologically safe inside. So what's going on when we feel a little bit threatened in terms of our psychological safety? One of the things that's going on often is we experience some autonomic nervous system activation. You might feel kind of frightened. You might want to flight. You might be triggered to flight, to fight, to freeze. But what that tends to look like often, the early signs of that are rigidity. And there's a really interesting theory from my field of organizational behavior called threat rigidity effect, the threat rigidity effect. And what tends to happen there is we tend to regress to well-learned routines like getting defensive, blaming other people, clinging to protocols or policies. Um, Colleagues who work with me, James Lipshaw, who's the producer on this show, knows that when I'm under threat, I can get very picky and very a little rigid and doctrinaire and cling to ridiculous little rules. That's one of the things that plays out. Another thing that tends to happen when we're under threat is we tend to become more controlling, less collaborative, and we tend to be less exploratory. So as you think about, do I feel psychologically safe or not? It may well be that some of the first signs and symptoms that you don't feel psychologically safe is that sense of rigidity in what you're doing. May also go along with a feeling in your gut that you just don't feel safe, and that's that autonomic nervous system reaction. So let's just talk for a moment about how this internal feeling of psychological safety is important in things like meetings, rounds, debriefings, feedback conversations. I don't know about you, but I've had a situation on a number of occasions in a debriefing, for example, one that I was in charge of, where I said something that I could see immediately had landed extremely badly on someone else, and they just really checked out. And all my confidence kind of drained out of me because I realized, like, everybody else was looking at me. I did not know how to recover the situation. And I felt so both bad and a little bit ashamed that I, who was supposed to be an expert on this situation, had caused a situation where someone felt so bad. Another example of this that I think is very common is I think we've all been in meetings that are kind of going along reasonably well. And then someone, often a person who has some formal power, says something or does something, and a chill just falls over the room. And you yourself may feel like, Well, I'm sure as hell not saying anything else in this meeting. Whatever's going on with you physiologically or intellectually when you make that assessment, that's the kind of thing we're looking to detect as a sign of psychological safety draining out of the situation for you internally. The last example that I think is important is occasionally I'm invited to a meeting where from the very beginning, I don't feel psychologically safe myself, and I know from other things that people have said to me that they don't either. And so that feeling of kind of powerlessness within the team or powerlessness within the organization or not having a go-to move, I think accentuates that feeling of potentially dread and temporary internal shutdown where you don't have access to your curiosity, confidence, ability to connect, and all those other ways that we do act when we feel safe and social. Our workout of the week revolves around starting to be able to detect some of the different ways you feel when you feel psychologically unsafe. It's important to start detecting those different ways that you might feel psychologically unsafe, bringing a little granularity to it, because there are different physiological, psychological, and cognitive responses that go along with feeling unsafe. And getting some handle on what those are will really help you transform them later. So your workout of the week is to notice when you feel psychologically unsafe. And that could be from feeling triggered, kind of a fight response might come up, or flooded, kind of flight response might come up, or freeze, but something doesn't feel safe. What is the quality of those feelings of unsafety? So, Curious Now is produced by the Center for Medical Simulation and directed and edited by our producer, James Lipshaw. And if you're interested in extending the kind of work that we've talked about today, we offer leadership coaching, we offer organizational consulting and instructor training to help you apply these kinds of things in your teaching, coaching, or leading activities. And if you're interested particularly in leadership, here's a message from Grace Eng, our Senior Director of Atlas, our faculty development programs on our new leadership course.
Hello, I am Grace Eng, Senior Director of Atlas Programs at the Center for Medical Simulation. So I wonder if the following situation might sound familiar to you. Say you are a fantastic simulation instructor, and you do amazing debriefings and design fantastic simulation cases. Or maybe you are a healthcare simulation operations professional, and you know how to fix anything and everything that can go wrong in your simulation center. You do such a great job, and you get promoted into a leadership position. And suddenly, you find yourself in very unfamiliar territory, because now you are in charge of people. You are now in charge of budget and finance and facilities and strategy. Or maybe you even need to deal with politics in your greater organization. And you find yourself feeling frustrated and lost because nobody has ever taught you how to do any of these things. And your skill set that had helped you be successful in your previous role now does not serve you as well anymore. I want you to know you are not alone. Many simulation leaders find themselves in a similar boat. And at the Center for Medical Simulation, we think our Simulation Leadership Intensive course may be right for you. We want to help you develop a set of tools to navigate simulation leadership situations. We want to help you develop your leadership presence. We want you to be able to grow teams that are psychologically safe and motivated to be successful. And we want to help you develop a set of skills to help you navigate politics in your organization. So many of you have taken our simulation instructor courses before, and you've had transformational experience in those courses. And what we offer with our good judgment approach has helped you grow tremendously. Well, here, as you grow, we want to grow right along with you. And we hope you can join our Simulation Leadership Intensive course if this sounds right for you.